So recently there was the Victory Road May Challenge, a big online tournament with 204 players. And I managed to win it, with a fairly unique team of Calyrex Shadow, Miraidon, Incineroar, Chien, whimsicott and Iron Hands. And I think the interesting thing about this team winning it is the restricted pairing I decided to use, being Miraidon and Calyrex Shadow. Now if you look at the restricted usage stats, Miraidon is number 1 and Calyrex Shadow is number 2. However, when you look at the restricted pairings, Miraidon Calyrex Shadow is not even in the top 10. This means that in this tournament, there was less than 4 Miraidon Calyrex Shadows in the whole tournament, and yet it still managed to win. And this team is so good that every good player that's spoken about it has said this is obviously the best team in the format.
Like, honestly, it looks terrible. It is just bad.
So now let's talk about the team. As I said before, it is whimsicott, Calyrex Shadow, Miraidon, Incineroar, Iron Hands and Chien. And first I'm going to talk about the whimsicott and the Calyrex Shadow, as that was the starting point of the team. So I'm not taking Regulation I super seriously, because I'm not going to Worlds and I've not got any real life tournaments for now. So when I was building, I was trying to think of what I enjoyed playing with in old formats that I could maybe make a new version of this format. And the thing that came to mind was whimsicott plus Mega Gengar, with Fake Tears Whimsicott. Now, I really enjoyed playing with this in 2015, 2016, 2018 and 2019, even though I never actually took it to a tournament. But I was thinking Fake Tears with Calyrex Shadow sounds completely busted. Like, I actually also tried this out in Reg G, and I did think that there was a lot of potential there, but I could never get it to quite feel right, so ended up not taking it to any tournaments. Because obviously taking Chien to Internats was a better choice. So the whimsicott is Covert Cloak. I think that's just the best item on whimsicott. It stops Fake Out and it can stop Icy Winds and Snarls as well, but Fake Out's the big one, especially with Calyrex Shadow, because if I lead these two, I am leading my 2 Pokemon that are immune to Fake Out, which can be really nice. Prankster is its best ability. There's literally no reason to run anything else. And then for moves, I've got Moonblast, Tail with an Encore. So those are fairly standard. Moonblast is its best damaging move, especially with Calyrex Shadow, because Calyrex Shadow can't hit dark types, whereas Moonblast is super effective against dark types. I have tested Grass Knot on whimsicott as well, but it just didn't feel great, so I think Moonblast is way better. Tailwind is kind of the whole point of whimsicott. It's got really good speed control, and this team relies a lot on speed control in some matchups. And then Encore can just punish people for making more defensive plays or clicking a move that they don't really want to be clicking anymore. And it's got another big use, which I'll talk about when I get to Calyrex Shadow. But the big move that people should be taking note of is Fake Tears. Fake Tears was most of what made this team work. Fake Tears paired with Calyrex Shadow, paired with Miraidon, paired with Chien sometimes, but they rarely come together, is just so powerful and so much offense that a lot of people really don't know how to deal with it. And usually on a whimsicott you see Light Screen in this slot, and Light Screen is good, but if you've got the more standard whimsicott set with Light Screen, it's not really threatening much. Like, it can Tailwind, it can Light Screen, and then it can Moonblast for some damage, but it's quite easy to ignore in some situations, whereas when it's got Fake Tears, suddenly it's making its partner Pokemon so much more powerful. Like, I believe in Regulation G we saw a Helping Hand whimsicott get top 4 at a regional, and Fake Tears boosts the damage even more than that. It basically makes any special move double damage, which also works out for whimsicott sometimes, making its Moonblasts actually do damage. And another huge advantage Fake Tears has over something like Helping Hand is you can Fake Tears something before you have to attack it, if that makes sense. So like with Helping Hand, you Helping Hand something and then you have to hit it that turn with the thing you're Helping Handing. A lot of the time with this whimsicott, I'm Fake Tearsing something because then my Calyrex Shadow or Miraidon in the back can then threaten it a lot more, which can make some endgames so much easier. When you're facing something like an Assault Vest Rillaboom, which your Cali Shadow usually shouldn't be able to beat, but when it's at -2 special defense, you can beat it. And then for the spread doesn't really do anything specific, so I wanted max speed because I like the idea that in a whimsicott mirror, if we both click Tailwind, at worst, my Encore is going to be a speed tie. I also quite like the things that it outspeeds. So outspeeding like Tornadus and Ogerpons, for example, can be huge in some matchups, especially like an Ogerpon Rock, where usually the Sturdy can be a bit annoying for your Sash Calyrex Shadow, but you can just Terra Ghost Astral Barrage and then Moonblast it and get rid of it. So I really liked the max speed, and then I decided I wanted to make it especially bulky, but this doesn't do anything specific, so it's probably not the right spread. There's probably a way better spread for this whimsicott, but I couldn't figure it out, so this is what I used. And then the Terra was Terra Water. I think that this is the correct Terra. I only clicked it once during the tournament, but it did win me that game. And that was my winning in for day 2 as well. Without this Terra, I don't think I would have made day 2. Well, I needed an ice resist Terra basically to make day 2, which water does really well, but it's also very good into the Chi-Yu, Koraidon, Weezing teams. Because what those teams should be doing into this team is leading Koraidon, Chi-Yu, and then they can threaten switching in the Weezing and getting rid of the Whimsicott if you've led the Whimsicott. And I think a lot of the time you might have to lead Whimsicott into those teams because this team doesn't have great options into it otherwise. So being able to Terra Water so that their Chi-Yu can't get rid of you and you can get a Tailwind up is just really useful. Like, I guess they could make a read with Koraidon and like Collision Course you, but I'm not even sure if that KOs. So yeah, I think Terra Water is the correct Terra. These moves were incredible. Fake Tears, I think, should be the biggest takeaway from this tournament. Everyone is always putting Light Screen on their Whimsicott, and I do think it's good, but Fake Tears is just so game-changing sometimes. And then next is Calyrex Shadow. I went for Sash, but I think Life Orb could also be good. But the main reason I went for Sash was because if I've got Calyrex Shadow versus Whimsicott, Sash basically puts me in a position where if either of their Pokemon will go down to a Fake Tears Astral Barrage, I can just Fake Tears Astral Barrage that slot, get rid of it, and then as long as that Pokemon hasn't attacked me, my Calyrex Shadow is definitely lasting the turn, because it doesn't matter what their other Pokemon does, they can't KO me because my Focus Sash. I was very close to locking in Terra Dark Life Orb for the tournament, but decided not to because I wasn't really used to it, and I didn't want me not being used to taking Life Orb recoil to then lose me games. And Sash was incredible the whole time. I think Sash might be right, but Life Orb is definitely worth exploring on this team. And then Sash lets you be Terra Ghost, which makes you much more powerful. It makes you about as powerful as a Life Orb would. So again, Life Orb might be better, but Terra Ghost was really nice. And Sash lets you run max special attack and max speed, because you don't really have to EV for living stuff. You have to be a bit careful about urshifus, but this team is very anti-urshifu anyway. A lot of the time it's fine. A lot of the time people are not bringing urshifu into this team. Evan as moves, Astral Barrage is the main reason to run Calyrex. Protect is really important. Like, Protect is there because it's one of the best moves in VGC, but it's also the only Protect on the team, which is something I really didn't like about the team, but I could never fit Protect on anything else. Psychic is just strong single target damage. It lets you hit stuff like Ursaluna, which is very important, but you can also hit Zamazenta around Wide Guards. You do have to be careful into Wide Guard Lunala with this, but a lot of the time this team has very good options into most Lunala teams, and if Wide Guard is being that much of an issue, you can just try and disable it. Disable on this Calyrex was incredible. I feel like I've not been seeing Disable on Calyrex apart from on the ones of those Terrapagos teams that are Encore Disable, but Disable by itself is really good. So I first started running it because I thought pairing it with the Encore Whimsicott could be very nice, because if I ever just needed a free turn, I can Encore Disable a slot and just shut that down. And I think I only did that twice during the tournament, maybe 3 times, but I did it in my winning in for day 2, and in my winning in for Top Cut, and both times I did it in a game 3 and it won me the game. Like in my winning in for day 2, I led Miraidon Whimsicott into their Whimsicott and Assault Vest Calyrex Ice, and they light screened turn 1, so I was doing very little damage to them as they were threatening a lot on me. I went for Electro Drift onto that Calyrex that did like nothing, and I went for Terra Water and Tailwind on my Whimsicott. But then when I brought in my Calyrex Shadow, I was able to Encore Disable their Calyrex Ice, which gave me a free turn, and their Whimsicott went for Tailwind, so I could also Encore that and just start clicking Astral Barrage, and there's not really anything they could do in that situation. So Encore Disable was amazing. It doesn't come up that much, but when it does, it's usually game winning. But Disable has a lot of other uses as well. The big one being Specs Miraidon is everywhere right now. Specs Miraidon has become the standard set again, which as it should because it is the best. So you can easily just disable a Miraidon after it's attacked, and then it has to switch out to do anything. Like I did that in my top 8 game against Eden, and I think if I didn't have the disable, that probably would have been a lot closer of a game, but because I could disable their Miraidon, it made that game a lot easier from that point. Disable can also work very well into stuff like Sucker Punch and Thunderclap. So 3 different times during the tournament, I was in a position where my Calyrex was at 1 HP because it was taken to its sash, and there was a Chien-Pao or a Raging Bolt on the other side. And all 3 times I went for Disable on that Chien-Pao or on that Raging Bolt as they clicked Sucker Punch or Thunderclap. And all those 3 times it won me the game. being able to go for that one move a game. Obviously that's a bit of a read because they could just attack if they expect the disable, but I think because people aren't used to facing disabled Calyrex, they don't really think of that as an option. So that's another great use for Disable. Disable can also be used to make sure certain of your Pokemon aren't taking damage that turn. So for example, if you're facing a Zamazenta and it's just Heavy Slammed, I can disable that Heavy Slam and suddenly that Zamazenta can't hit my Calyrex Shadow. And sometimes that's game changing as well. Like Disable genuinely is so good. And then you can also use Disable if you notice your opponent has certain patterns of play and you can punish those patterns. So in my top 16 game against Arubega, in game 1 I noticed that they were playing in a certain way. So turn 1 of game 1 they knock off into my Protect, and then turn 2 they knocked me off. Turn 3 they U-turned into my Protect, and turn 4 they U-turned to KO my Calyrex. In game 2, after they knock off to my Calyrex's Protect turn 1, I just disabled them turn 2 and they click knockoff again, meaning that I bought myself a free turn when I wouldn't have been able to with any other move. So Disable, I think, has been severely overlooked on Calyrex Shadow. Encore is obviously very good and maybe better, and Nasty Plot is obviously very strong as well, but I really think people should be looking more at Disable as the 4th move on Cali Shadow. The next Pokemon is Miraidon. So I started with the Whimsicott and the Cali Shadow, and because I had Fake Tears on Whimsicott, I wanted my next restricted to also be a special attacking one. And the two that stuck out to me that I could use were Miraidon and Kyogre. And I didn't really want to use Kyogre on this, mainly because Kyogre really likes spamming spread moves, and that's also what Calyrex Shadow likes doing. So if I had Kyogre, I think Wide Guard would have been way too much of an issue for this team. And I also think Miraidon is the best restricted in the format. It just feels amazing, and it feels like it pairs with basically any other restricted. So the items choice specs, that's become the standard again now, but when I actually built the first version of this team, it really wasn't that common. It was just after the first regional when in the finals it was Assault Vest Miraidon versus Scarf Miraidon. And I felt like on ladder, I was mainly seeing those two and I wasn't seeing many Specs. And I really felt like people were sleeping on Specs Miraidon. Like, Specs Miraidon is very clearly the best set to me because it just threatens so much damage. And then the moves in Terra are barely standard. Terra Fairy works very well with Gleam, and Gleam works very well with Calyrex Shadow because Calyrex Shadow can't hit Dark types, so you can use Gleam to punish Dark types or things that are going for Terra Dark. Volt Switch, Electro, Drift, and Draco are just its best moves. Draco is a really good nuke into stuff like Amoonguss and Rillaboom. Electro Drift is good, consistent damage. Volt Switch lets you pivot. I do think on this team, it's very important to know when to Volt Switch and when to just lock into Electro Drift and keep Miraidon in. So in a good amount of games, I would be leading Miraidon plus Fake Out with Calyrex Shadow and Whimsicott in the back. And if I'm doing that, the HP on my Calyrex Shadow and my Whimsicott are much more important than my Miraidon. So in those sort of games, a lot of the time I want to be locking into Electro Drift or maybe into Gleam. Whereas if I'm going with double Fake Out, Miraidon and Calyrex Shadow, that's when Volt Switch becomes a lot better. Miraidon and Calyrex Shadow also have a very unique synergy. So as I've said before, this is Sash Calyrex Shadow. And Sash Calyrex Shadow really hates priority because a lot of the time it's going to be taken to Sash, and then if your opponent has priority, they can just get rid of it and then your Calyrex is kind of useless. But there's so many teams in this format where the only priority they have is Grassy Glide. And with Miraidon, you can switch off the grassy terrain, making Grassy Glide not priority. So in a good amount of matchups, Miraidon is technically a priority blocker for Calyrex Shadow, which actually comes up so much. When I built the team, I didn't even think of that as like an option, but then when playing it, it just comes up so much of the time that it's really strong. And then there's the spread. I went with Max Timid Miraidon. Now this was actually a very last minute change. Like, I was always timid, but I was usually around 190, speed creeping modest Miraidons and things that want to be outspeeding modest Miraidon. But I found in practice that a good amount of Miraidons were still outspeeding me, and I think that the matchup becomes a bit awkward when their Miraidon is outspeeding you, whereas when you're outspeeding them, you have a lot more options. A lot of the time when you're playing a Miraidon versus Miraidon, it's sort of a mind game. You know, do you Electro Drift them as they Terra Fairy? Do they not Terra Fairy and then you can Draco, or you could Terra Fairy yourself and Dazzling Gleam them? But when you're the faster one, you're playing the mind game of can you hit the Miraidon, not can you survive a hit? And sometimes you don't need to be hitting their Miraidon. So for example, in finals, I was leading Miraidon Iron Hands into their Incineroar. And they kept having to play the mind game of do I Terra, do I Gleam, do I Electro Drift? But in my head, I was fine with leaving their Miraidon alone because I had Calyrex Shadow in the back. It was much more important for me to hit their Assault Vest Incineroar to then put it into Astral Barrage range. So both times I would just Electro Drift that slot and I didn't have to play the mind game, and both times I was getting the mind game right by not playing it. Like game 1, I think they Electro Drifted me and Terra Fairied, and then in game 2 I think they Gleamed Terra Fairied, but then I lived the Gleam anyway, so both times they felt like they had to Terra Fairy in case I Terra Fairied or I Dracoed them, and then made their Miraidon not resist my Electro Drifts anymore, making them very vulnerable. So being max speed was really nice for the Miraidon Mirror, but it's also very good for just speed tying a lot of other things like Koraidon, Fluttermane, and Chien. Now obviously you don't want to rely on speed ties when playing Pokemon, but sometimes you can make plays where it's fine if you lose the speed tie, but it's incredible if you win the speed tie. An example of this, I remember a play I made. I had Incineroar and Miraidon in front of their Chien and something, I don't remember. And it was turn 2, so I didn't have Fake Out active. And I went for Terra Fairy Volt Switch into their Chien and switched out my Incin. If I lose the speed tie, their -1 Ice Spinner goes into my Terra Fairy Miraidon. And that's fine, I take that fairly well, and I do a lot of damage to them with Volt Switch. But if I win the speed tie, I Volt Switch first, bring them to Sash, and then get to bring in my Rocky Helmet Incin so that they then go down when they Ice Spin at me. And in that game, I did actually lose the speed tie, but I still won the game. And I think it's very strong in Pokemon when you have certain plays that if it doesn't go your way with the RNG, it's fine, it's still a good play. But if it does go your way in the RNG, it's genuinely game winning. Like if I won that speed tie, I win the game on the spot. But I lost it and I still won the game because it was still a good turn. And then the rest of the EVs, they don't do anything specific. I feel like you need a good amount of investment because you're not modest, so you've got to make up for it. When I was testing the slower Miraidon, I was 176 on my special attack and the rest in bulk, and that was because then I hit the same as modest Miraidon when it hits the bump. But when I made it faster, I didn't want to take it all out of bulk. So I took some out of special attack, and I don't think I ever missed it. I don't know if my Miraidon ever left something on very little HP, but I can't fully remember. And this bulk actually felt about right for the tournament. Again, it doesn't do anything specific, but so much of the time this Miraidon was living on between 10 and 30 HP. So it's like this bulk was probably just above what I needed for the tournament. So then when I had these 3 on the team, I decided I needed a bit of control, so either priority blocking or Fake Out. I have tested other versions of this team with Farigiraf, and Farigiraf's just not really my sort of Pokemon this format. I've liked it in a lot of other formats, but I don't really get it this format. So I decided I needed Fake Out. And the obvious choice is Incineroar. It's the best Pokemon ever made, and it was incredible, as Incineroar always is. So I went for Rocky Helmet. With Miraidon being on the team, I felt like I probably didn't need goggles, and Rocky Helmet felt like the next best item. It might not actually be the best because urshifu very rarely comes into this team, but it's very nice for getting chip on Zamazenta, which will then put it in Electro Drift range, or for breaking sashes on something like an Ice Spinner Chien, or for just punishing U-turns and stuff. Like a lot of this team is trying to get stuff into range of Astral Barrage, and then Calyrex is just going to be winning the end game, and Rocky Helmet sometimes helps that. And then for moves, it's Knockoff, Will-O-Wisp, Parting Shot, Fake Out. Fairly standard moves. I think that Knockoff, Parting Shot, and Fake Out are all correct. I really liked all of them. Knockoff is just Incineroar's best attacking move. Also, knocking off Assault Vests can be very useful for this team. Parting Shot helps you slow down the pace of the game, which I think a lot of people would look at this team and think it wants U-turn, and U-turn is probably still a good option, but being able to just slow the pace of the team down and almost give the team fake bulk, I think is really nice. The team's not that bulky. You can clearly see it's got Calyrex Shadow Miraidon. Neither of the restricteds are bulky restricteds, so you can use Parting Shot to make them feel bulkier than they are. And then Fake Out is Fake Out. Will-O-Wisp I liked on it, but I think that there's maybe a better option. So Will-O-Wisp was very good for just shutting down Calyrex Ices. If there's a Calyrex Ice in front of my Incin, I am clicking Wisp on that, and even if it's the Leech Seed one, it's not doing much damage with Glacial Lance. It just has to be spamming Leech Seed, and a lot of the time, this team isn't letting you get a Leech Seed win. Some of the time it is. If they play very well, sometimes a Leech Seed Calyrex Ice in the back is going to end up winning. But Will-O-Wisp was mainly there for Calyrex Ice, but it also is very good into like Zam, Rillaboom, Chien-Pao, Koraidon. This is a very fast Incin, so I ran 103 speed, which means it outspeeds... it actually speed ties with Iron Bundle, which is bad. Don't know why I've done that. But it outspeeds Chien-Pao in Tailwind, so it also outspeeds Koraidon and Flutter main and Miraidon, so I can knock off like a Specs. I could Wisp a Koraidon, I could Wisp a Chien-Pao. That doesn't actually come up that much because you're not getting Incin into Tailwind that much, but the speed was very nice for outspeeding other Incineroars. Like during my practice with this team and in the tournament, the only Incineroars that were ever outspeeding mine were on the Michael DeBesti team. So every other Incineroar seemed to be slower than mine, and a lot of the time with this team, you need the faster fake out for it to work. But yeah, this Will-O-Wisp I think could be Helping Hand. I think Helping Hand would make a lot of sense as well, and I did kind of wish I had Helping Hand in some of my matchups. Finals would have been a lot easier with Helping Hand, but I think anytime I wanted Helping Hand, I still won the set. So it was never like set losing that I didn't have Helping Hand, but I think it might be better because it pairs so well with Calyrex Shadow, but also with Miraidon and just everything else. And yeah, the spread, I've spoken about the speed already. I just wanted it to be specially bulky. This just hits the bump and then the rest in HP. Doesn't do anything specific. There might be a better spread. I'm not sure. Terra Water was mainly there because it made me feel much more comfortable with bringing Incineroar into Kyogre matchups. But I didn't actually face any Kyogres in the tournament. So the one time I did Terra Water, it was just to get rid of my fighting weakness, and I think I still lost that game anyway. So this Terra could definitely be something else. I'm not sure what it should be. So then I had these core 4, and this felt quite strong to me. But one thing I was very scared of was Trick Room. And I wanted a Trick Room answer that was also a good Pokemon. And Amoonguss would be the usual go-to Trick Room answer, but with my own Miraidon, and Miraidon being so popular, it didn't feel like it would be good enough as a Trick Room answer. So I went with Iron Hands. Most importantly, Min Speed Iron Hands. So Min Speed Iron Hands speed ties with Min Speed Ursaluna and Calyrex, which isn't ideal, but sometimes in team building you can't really find the right partner without completely changing what you've got already, and I really liked this. So I went with Min Speed Iron Hands. This spread, I just wanted to make it as powerful as possible, and then this just seemed right. Again, I feel like I'm saying this about every spread. This spread doesn't do anything, but it was good. This spread actually lived on 3 HP in game 2 of my top 8. So it was the perfect amount of bulk, I guess, for that set. And then it's Assault Vest, because that's Iron Hands' best item. Drain Punch, Low Kick, Wild Charge, Fake Out. Fake Out's Fake Out. Low Kick does so much damage to the restricteds, was probably my most clicked move. Drain Punch can help keep Iron Hands healthier, which is really nice. And then Wild Charge and Electric Terrain does a lot of damage to things that the fighting moves can't hit. And then I went with Terrabug, and I liked Terrabug a lot. So the biggest reason for Terrabug is it makes you a ground resist, and that's very important into Ursaluna. So as I said, this is my Trick Room answer, and it does speed tie with Ursaluna, but with the Terrabug and with Intimidate, I can take hits from an Ursaluna. Like, even if they Facade, I think that does like 90% to me. If I'm intimidating them as well, it's doing even less. So it's not reliant on winning the speed tie, but sometimes it's just better when you do win the speed tie, if that makes sense. Like, there'd be a lot of situations where I win on the spot if I win the speed tie, and I'm probably fine if I lose, but it might be a bit tricky. And a lot of people are probably thinking, what if the Ursaluna goes for Terra Ghost? And that's a very good question. But if they go for Terra Ghost, if I manage to stall out the Trick Room, they're then weak to my Calyrex Shadow, but also a lot of Ursaluna teams really want to Terra another Pokemon into me. So for example, if they've got a Miraidon, they probably want to Terra in front of my Miraidon and in front of my Iron Hands. If they've got a Lunala, they can't really safely set up Trick Room without Terroring in front of my Calyrex Ice. So a lot of the time you can force people to Terra something else, meaning that their Ursaluna stays weak to fighting. The ground resist from Bug is also very good into Iron Treads. Iron Treads destroys this team. This team just gets destroyed by Iron Treads. And with Terra Bug, I felt like I could probably lead Iron Hands into any Treads teams. I go for Terra and just Drain Punch them. If they Terra Ghost, then they're weak to my Calyrex, and I've probably got Calyrex Whimsicott in the back. But if they don't Terra Ghost, I get rid of the Treads turn 1. And then Bug's also good for a few other resistances. It was very nice to resist Grass in some matchups, and also resisting Fighting is very nice into opposing Iron Hands Miraidon teams. So Bug definitely felt right. I really liked Bug. Iron Hands was very good the whole tournament. I'm really happy with how Iron Hands performed. It felt like it was doing what it was meant to do really well. The Iron Hands also gives the team a double fake out mode, which is obviously very powerful. We've seen it on Miraidon before, getting second at EUIC with Dill, and it felt very good on this team as well. Like in matchups where I didn't feel like I needed Whimsicott or Chien, having double fake out with Miraidon and Calyrex Shadow just felt incredible. I also quite like having double fake out because of the amount of Grimmsnarls that are about. So Grimmsnarl is technically a bit of an issue for this team. It's more that Light Screen is an issue for this team. So in a lot of games, I am relying on my double restrictors to do most of the damage, which are both obviously special attackers. So if I let my opponent set up Light Screen, then it's very hard for me to end up winning the game. I can sometimes using like fake tears to like sort of blast through it, and ruination on Chien as well, which I'll talk about in a bit. But for the most part, I just want to stop Light Screen going up. So if I ever saw a Grimmsnarl, every single time I would lead Miraidon plus one of the 2 fake outs, and I would always fake it out and Electrodrift it. Sometimes I would Terra Gleam. You've got to Terra to get rid of it as well, but every time I am just doubling into that Grimmsnarl and trying to get rid of it. And yes, they can Terra Ghost, but if they Terra Ghost, firstly they're wasting their Terra on Grimmsnarl, which isn't that great to this team. But also they're just doing it for one screen, which can be game changing. But from their point of view, it's not really that good to go for. Now obviously Grimmsnarl can also Thunderwave, but I'm leading Miraidon with Iron Hands or Incin into it, so they've got no Thunderwave targets on the field right now. So much of the time they just let their Grimmsnarl go down because they don't think the Terra's worth it. And even if they do Terra, that does make them weak to Astral Barrage. I think a quite cool thing about Iron Hands as well is Fake Out plus Volt Switch can KO Grimmsnarls. So I don't think it's guaranteed, but I think it's like a decent chance to KO Grimmsnarls, depending on the spread, obviously. So that's also another good option with Iron Hands, whereas with Incin you can't do that, but I think I was usually leading Incin, Miraidon into the Grimmsnarl teams, mainly because I wanted Iron Hands to be safe in the back, because they usually have a Trick Room mode. And then we've got the last member of the team, Chien. Now this is definitely the most changeable member of the team. In fact, in practice, this slot was changing a lot. It was originally a Water Urshifu, then it became a Farigiraf, because I was struggling a bit with dealing with fake outs because of my lack of protects, but that was more of a play issue than a team issue, I found out. Like the more I played with the team, I figured out that wasn't an issue. It became a Volcarona for a bit. Volcarona was actually very good on this team as well. However, I felt like I needed the Quiver Dance set and Rage Powder, meaning that I couldn't have Protect on the Quiver Dance set, which I think it needs to be good. And the fact that I needed Rage Powder on it as well meant it just didn't feel right. And then there was Sneasler as well, which I think has a lot of potential in this slot. Sneasler I came up with the idea for not long before the tournament started, so I was just out of practice with it, so I went with Chien. So Choice Scarf Chien, probably the best item. I think Sash has some usage, but not on this team, but Choice Scarf Chien is very good this format. It's very good at just outspeeding everything, and also resisting Calyrex is very important. But the big thing it does, it Beads of Ruin, boosting both of the restricted whilst also being able to threaten a lot of damage itself. Terra Ghost, I think, is probably its best Terra. You can avoid body presses, but it's mainly there to stop fake outs. This spread is simple, it's fast, and it's modest and does damage. Timid might be good, but I liked modest. And then as moves, Heat Wave is just very good spread damage. It's just very threatening to face a Chien that's Heat Waving when you don't have Wide Guard, because you can't really stop it and you're taking a decent chunk of damage on any of your Pokemon. Flamethrower was insanely good. I think it might have been my most clicked move. So firstly, it's 100% accurate, which is something Chien doesn't have many of, so that's very nice, but it's also very good at getting around wide guards whilst also doing good damage. So with the amount of Zamazentas that exist right now, I wanted to be able to hit Zamazenta when it's clicking wide guard, and Overheat is also an option, but after one Overheat, your Chien really isn't doing that much damage, whereas Flamethrower can do a lot of damage. So it forces a lot of Zams to Terra in front of it, but you can also basically put Zams in situations where they have to wide guard even though you're clicking Flamethrower, because you've got your Chi-Yu next to a Calyrex Shadow, which is threatening this Ghost to Astral Barrage damage. So Flamethrower was insanely good at just doing consistent damage and was really was Chi-Yu's best move. I think Snarl is insanely strong in this format. Basically all teams have at least one special restricted, and sometimes they've got two, and Snarl makes them weaker. It also gets around redirection, which is very nice. It's also very good into Cali Shadows, because even if they go for like Terra Dark Nasty Plot, you Snarl them, they're now at +1 and you get another Snarl before they get to attack. And they've had to waste their Terra on Terra Dark to not be weak to Snarl. So Snarl, I think, is very good. It's also quite good into stuff like Terrapagos and I guess Calm-Minding Lunalas, but a lot of the time the way you approach those matchups is by encoring them into Calm Mind and then just spamming Fake Tears, so it doesn't matter how many Calm Minds they set up, they're still going to go down to these Miraidon or Cali Shadow. And then the last move is Ruination, and this was very last minute added as well. And a lot of people are probably thinking, oh, Ruination is really good for getting around Shadow Shield and Terra Shell. And it is, but that wasn't the main reason I added it to the team. The main reason I added it to the team was actually because of Swordfish. So the Swordfish matchup for this team is pretty bad. I rely a lot on my Miraidon or my Iron Hands to be beating Kyogres. But when there's a Zacian next to it, it's very hard to do. And anytime I'd look at the calc of like Fake Tears Terra Ghost Astral Barrage on their Kyogre, I'd see that it was doing maximum 49%. And I was like, wow, if only I could like do 50% to it and somehow boost my Calyrex Shadow. So Ruination with Beads of Ruin is very good at beating Kyogres. I do think Kyogre is a bit of a rough matchup, so with Gavin winning, maybe this team isn't going to ever pop off again. But I faced no Kyogres in the whole tournament, and it really didn't have that high usage in the tournament, so I guess I technically made a good meta call, but I didn't on purpose. But Ruination was there for Swordfish. It's also, I guess it's good for like into screen stuff, because even if they set up light screen, I've got guaranteed 50% damage, but most of the time I'm stopping light screen from being set up. I only clicked Ruination twice, and it was actually, I just misplayed. Like the times I used Ruination in the tournament, it was me playing badly. So it wasn't great in the tournament, but I think it's more on me. If I carry on using this team, I think I'll really learn how I'm meant to use Ruination more, but I think it's a good option. I think Dark Pulse might be better. I think Psychic isn't bad either, but actually no, Psychic's bad. What am I saying? Like Psychic is only good for beating Scarf Ursh, which is not an issue for this team and is not even seen that much. So yeah, that's the team. I'm really happy I was able to get this performance because I worked quite hard on trying to make this work. And I'm glad I was able to win the tournament with such a bad team. So yeah, if you did enjoy this, please like, comment, subscribe. I'm also going to try and do some videos going through some of the matches I played in the tournament, but I wasn't recording, so I'm not sure how they'll turn out if I even get around to it. But I know my top 8 was recorded by my opponent, so I'll definitely be talking about my top 8. So yeah.